The last school bell had rung, and the hallways of Maplewood Elementary stood empty, but for the faint whisper of rain against the windows. Inside room 204, the smell of crayons and floor cleaner lingered. Papers sat scattered across desks like small, unspoken stories. Miss Carter, the fifth-grade teacher, was erasing the board when she heard it. So soft at first she thought it might be the drain pipe moaning. "I don't want to go home," a small voice said. "I hate them." The words came from the coat corner near the cubbies. She turned, motioning quietly, trying not to startle whoever remained. There, half hidden behind a row of raincoats, stood Emma. The phone in her hand glowed faint blue against her cheek as she whispered into it with the urgent hush of a secret. "I said I don't want to," Emma repeated, her voice trembling. "Please, can I stay at Mom's? I promise I'll be good." For a moment, the teacher simply watched, her eraser suspended midair. The rest of the room held its breath. Rain pressed a rhythm against the glass, steady as a heartbeat. Ms. Carter's chest tightened. Something in the girl's tone, raw, desperate, pricked deep into a place she kept guarded. When you've been teaching 20 years, you know the everyday complaints about homework or bedtime fights. This wasn't that. This was fear with edges. She stepped closer, her shoes making soft sounds on the tile. Emma stiffened like a bird sensing movement. Into the phone, she said quickly, "I have to go," then ended the call before sliding the device into her pocket. Her face was pale, her lower lip chewed raw. "Emma?" Miss Carter's voice stayed even. "Everyone else has gone home. Did you miss your bus?" The child nodded too fast. "My dad's coming," she murmured, eyes fixed on the floor. "All right," the teacher said gently. "You can wait here until he arrives." She busied herself stacking folders so the girl wouldn't feel cornered. Still, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Emma's shoulders drawn tight like someone bracing for impact. Minutes passed. The hallway clock clicked loudly in the quiet. When the phone on Ms. Carter's desk buzzed with the custodian's goodnight text, the teacher jumped. So did Emma. That tiny flinch told its own story. "It's after 4, Ms. Carter said softly. "Do you want me to call your dad to check his arrival time?" "No!" The word burst out sharper than intended. Emma's hands trembled as she stuffed notebooks into her backpack. Her sleeve slipped up just enough for Miss Carter to glimpse a faint bluish mark circling her wrist, delicate skin mottled as if from an old bruise. The girl tugged the fabric down quickly. "He said he'd be here. He doesn't like waiting." "I understand." The teacher crouched slightly to meet her eyes, that single glimpse tightening the unease already building in her chest. "If you ever need to talk about anything, you can stay after class, okay?" Instead of answering, Emma kept her head down. When the sound of tires splashing outside echoed through the open window, she flinched again. A car door slammed. Too loud. Too final. Emma grabbed her backpack and nearly ran to the door. "Emma!" Miss Carter called softly. The girl paused just long enough to whisper, "I'm sorry," before darting down the hallway. The outer doors banged shut, leaving silence thick enough to feel. Miss Carter remained by the window, rain flickering like static across the glass. Somewhere in the parking lot, a man's voice called out, low, impatient, and a small figure climbed into a waiting car. The taillights faded into the gray. The teacher stood for a long time after that, hands still dusted with chalk. She told herself not to overthink it. Custody arrangements, long days, emotional kids, but the words, "I don't want to go home, I hate them," would not release her. By the time she turned off the lights, the darkness of the room seemed to hold that whisper inside it. At home that evening, she sat by the kitchen window, grading spelling tests. Outside, the storm had passed, but water still dripped from the eaves like a slow metronome. On the page before her, a child had written family, Famili. She circled the word but couldn't move on. Each letter reminded her of that small, quivering voice behind the coats. She closed the folder and stared into the night. Some stories you overhear once and keep walking. Others follow you home, sit across the table, and wait for you to decide what kind of person you're going to be. Ms. Carter knew which kind this was. Morning light spilled across the classroom rugs, softening the edges of yesterday's chalk dust. The rain had cleared overnight, leaving everything sharp and new. Ms. Carter unlocked room 204 at 7:30, her lunch bag balanced on top of a stack of grading folders. Still, the echo of Emma's voice lingered in her chest like a hum too low to silence. When Emma arrived, she was quieter than usual, hair unbrushed, sleeves tugged down past her wrists. She stepped around her classmates as though worried any bump might shatter her. When someone dropped a pencil behind her, she flinched so hard that Jacob Miller gave a startled laugh before stopping himself. "It's fine," Emma whispered, half to him, half to herself. Ms. Carter wrote the morning agenda on the board, but kept watching. Sometimes concern meant listening for patterns. Kids who stopped drawing, who started apologizing too often. Emma moved like she was counting each step, careful not to misplace one. After morning announcements, Ms. Carter began spelling practice. Children called out letters in playful unison, but Emma's mouth stayed closed. The teacher passed by her desk and noticed the margins of Emma's worksheet filled with small pencil sketches, clouds with lightning splitting them, 2 stick figure houses separated by a jagged line. She said nothing, only set a hand gently on the edge of the desk. Emma stiffened at the contact, then pretended to erase something furiously. By recess, Ms. Carter's mind was restless. 23 children poured out to the playground, their shouts filling the air like bright colors. Only Emma sat on the lowest stair, lunchbox unopened. A duty aide called across the yard. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Emma nodded, but didn't move. Inside the staff room, the teacher poured black coffee into a paper cup. Across the table, Mr. Lewis from 4th grade scrolled through emails. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "Probably because I didn't," Ms. Carter answered lightly. Then, because honesty sometimes slipped out when she was tired, she added, "I'm worried about one of my kids. She seemed scared to go home yesterday." Lewis shrugged. "Custody case, right? I think I heard the office mention something about shared weeks. Kids get twisted in those tug-of-wars. It's exhausting, but usually fine." "She's not just tired," Ms. Carter said. "She flinched when someone raised their voice." He gave her the sympathetic look teachers use when they don't want to get involved. "Try not to carry it all. We can't fix everything." She nodded because that's what you did, but the words sat wrong in her throat. During art period, Ms. Carter used the excuse of organizing portfolios to check Emma's past drawings. One stood out, the same 2 houses. One colored bright yellow, the other grayed out under scribbled rain. Between them stood a small figure holding an umbrella too small to protect either side. On the back corner of the page, in neat print, "Week at Dad's." The teacher quietly opened the student information binder in her desk drawer. According to recent updates, Emma Dawson, age 10, lived alternating weeks with her parents. Custody finalized 2 months earlier. A routine arrangement on paper, yet Emma looked anything but routine. Through the last hour of the day, Ms. Carter weighed her options. Teachers reported suspected abuse through official channels, but suspicion without evidence could backfire. False alarms brought meetings, paperwork, angry calls from parents. Still, no part of her believed what she'd heard yesterday was nothing. When the dismissal bell finally rang, the children poured out in a rush of backpacks and bus numbers. Emma lingered again, stacking her notebooks too carefully. "Your dad picking you up today?" Ms. Carter asked. Emma paused. "Yeah. You okay about that?" "I have to be," the girl said, her voice thin as thread. Then she hurried out into the crowd. Ms. Carter cleaned the classroom slowly, ordering pencils into neat color rows just to give her hands something to do. Through the open blinds, she saw the parking line, a stream of cars and waving parents. When she spotted Emma, standing stiff beside a tall man in a dark jacket, her pulse quickened. He leaned down to speak, his gestures fast, sharp. Emma nodded quickly, keeping her chin down. When his hand landed on her shoulder, she flinched again before forcing a smile toward nearby teachers. The image stayed pinned behind Miss Carter's eyes long after they drove off. That night she couldn't focus on lesson plans. The television murmured untouched reports as she scrolled through district policy guidelines online, mandatory reporting laws, definitions of neglect, the fine print about reasonable suspicion. The language was full of caution. Educators shall refrain from forming premature conclusions regarding domestic disputes. It translated in her mind to be careful, protect yourself. She closed the laptop and rubbed her temples. Somewhere beyond her apartment wall, a neighbor's baby cried. She remembered Emma's voice, "Please, can't I stay at Mom's?" and felt her stomach twist. By morning, she decided on one small act that wouldn't break protocol. She'd mention attendance to the school counselor, no names, just concerns about adjustment, a neutral phrase that might open a door. At 9:30, Ms. Carter found Mrs. Patel, the counselor, arranging flyers outside her office. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "For you, always." Patel smiled, gesturing to a chair. Ms. Carter hesitated. "It's about one of my students. She's quieter than usual. I think the custody transition's rough." Patel nodded, familiar with cautious teacher talk. "Those cases take time. I can check in if you give me the details." Miss Carter nearly said the name, but something in her tightened. "Maybe just keep an eye on kids handling new home schedules," she said instead. Patel's knowing gaze softened. "Of course, but remember, confidentiality. Parents can be sensitive." Back in her classroom, the walls felt smaller. During silent reading, Emma rubbed the edge of her wrist repeatedly, as if scratching an itch through fabric. When she reached for her pencil, her sleeve slipped back. A faint mark ringed the delicate skin, tiny, bluish, half-healed. Miss Carter's breath caught before she forced her expression still. She crouched beside the desk. "That looks sore. Are you okay?" Emma tugged the sleeve down quickly. I fell off my bike." "In the rain yesterday?" "No, another day," the girl said without looking up. It could have been true. Kids fell. They bruised easily. Still, the explanation didn't reach her eyes. By the time lunch ended, Miss Carter had made up her mind to document what she'd noticed. Nothing accusatory, just facts. A teacher's record protected both student and staff. She wrote in clean, deliberate sentences. Student appeared withdrawn. Flinched at a loud sound. Observed bruise on wrist. Reports. Recent custody change. She signed and dated it before folding it into a sealed envelope marked confidential, counselor review. That small envelope sat on her desk through the final lesson like a heartbeat she could see. She intended to deliver it before heading home, but as the last bell rang, Emma approached her quietly. "Miss Carter?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Do you still have the picture I drew, the one with the houses?" "It's in your portfolio," Miss Carter said. "Do you want it back?" Emma shook her head. "No, I was just wondering if you saw the umbrella. It doesn't really help anyone." Then she walked away before the teacher could answer. Ms. Carter stood speechless, the envelope still under her hand. Outside the window, a thin wind stirred fallen leaves across the playground, carrying faint sounds of children reuniting with families that smiled and waved. She thought of Emma's tiny umbrella, how it shielded nothing, and realized the bruise on her wrist wasn't just an image in her mind. It was a call she couldn't ignore. That evening, she opened her notebook again and added one simple line beneath her notes. "Follow up tomorrow." The ink bled slightly on the page, a promise written in quiet determination. By midweek, the tension in room 204 had settled into something quieter but heavier, like dust that refused to lift. Ms. Carter found herself watching the doorway each morning as though Emma's arrival would answer a question she hadn't yet formed. The girl entered right on time, smile rehearsed, hair neatly braided. A good sign, the teacher told herself, though even the neatness made her uneasy. At the morning meeting circle, Ms. Carter announced the upcoming field trip, her tone bright. The class buzzed with chatter about permission slips and packed lunches. Only Emma stayed still, fiddling with the hem of her sleeve until it unraveled into loose threads. When the bell sent them to math, Miss Carter caught Mrs. Patel in the hallway. "Did you get my note?" she asked quietly. "I did," the counselor replied. "I logged it as a classroom observation. But you know how it goes. Confidentiality means I can't confirm whether I'll meet with her. If there is a concrete disclosure, we act. But bruises and mood changes, she trailed off with a sympathetic shrug. So, we just wait? We monitor, Patel said gently. Too many false alarms make the parents distrust us, believe me. I wish it were simpler. Monitor? The word landed like cold water. That afternoon, Ms. Carter sat at her desk, jotting lesson notes, but her eyes kept drifting toward the playground. The whistle blew, releasing students into organized chaos. She watched Emma gravitate toward the shady edge of the fence, where she picked at gravel with the toe of her shoe. A minute later, another teacher called the end of recess. Emma slipped quietly back inside without laughter, without conversation. By dismissal, Ms. Carter's unease had hardened into something almost procedural. If the system was slow, she would learn its edges and work within them. The first step was information. She approached the front office under the guise of checking attendance numbers. "Hey, Carol," she said lightly to the secretary. "Do you have last quarter's absences for my class? The counselor asked me to see if there's a correlation with grades." Carol typed quickly, reading from the screen. "Let's see. Emma Dawson, 5 absences, all excused by her father. Alternating addresses listed for custody. Court finalized in April." Miss Carter nodded, feigning casual interest. "Custody? Just finalized? That must be an adjustment." "Yep," said Carol, lowering her voice. "He was in here last month raising Cain over pickup procedures. Something about his ex-wife manipulating sign-out times. We keep it neutral, of course. Never know which parent will file a complaint." "Of course," Ms. Carter murmured, though her pulse quickened. She thanked Carol and left with more questions than answers. On her drive home that night, the windshield wipers beat steady time as the late spring drizzle returned. Maplewood streets glowed slick under streetlights. She almost missed the turn into the small grocery store until the flash of a familiar figure stopped her. By the vending machine near the entrance stood Emma, clutching a soda can. A man loomed beside her, broad-shouldered, tense. He was speaking sharply, finger pointed toward the curb. Miss Carter watched his motions reflect in the wet glass, a hand snatching the can, tossing it into the trash. Emma's shoulders curled inward. Without thinking, Miss Carter pulled into a far corner of the lot and waited until the pair got into a late-model sedan. The man's door slammed. The car pulled out too fast, tires hissing on asphalt. In the glow of the dash lights, she saw Emma's face turn toward the window, pale and still. That image followed her home like headlights in the rearview mirror. The next morning she sought out the bus driver, a kind man named Hank who often joked with students. He was leaning against the yellow bus steps, sipping coffee. "Hank," she began casually, "how's my class behaving these days?" "Pretty good bunch," he said, "except the usual sibling squabbles." "Do you have Emma on your route?" He nodded. "Comes on quiet as a mouse. Hardly says 2 words. Usually she's got a granola bar from the morning program. Sometimes she tries to take a second one. Hungry? Guess so. Not the first kid, won't be the last. I just tell her to finish breakfast before we roll." Miss Carter managed a thin smile. "Thanks. That helps." It did not help. It only deepened the ache. By Friday, she reached out to the lunch aide, too. The woman frowned, remembering. "That little girl, she hides bits of sandwich in her napkin sometimes. Says she isn't hungry, but pockets it. I thought maybe picky eater, but now that you mention it, patterns. Always patterns." Miss Carter jotted notes in the small planner she kept in her bag. Hunger, bruise, fear of pickup. Each mark tightened a knot in her chest. The following Monday, the school felt heavy, even before the first bell. Emma crawled into her seat, eyes shadowed. Miss Carter stepped closer between subjects. "Everything all right this morning?" "Fine." "Did you have breakfast?" Emma hesitated. "Not hungry." Ms. Carter slid a sealed pack of crackers onto her desk. Keep these, just in case." The child whispered, "Thank you," then tucked them carefully into her pencil case. During lunch duty, laughter burst suddenly from across the playground. 2 students teasing, a minor scuffle of energy. At the sound, Emma froze, mid-bite, head ducking as though expecting a blow. Ms. Carter's spoon hovered motionless over her soup. Something inside her resolved quietly. She wasn't imagining this. That evening, when most staff had left, her shoes echoed along the waxed hallway toward the counselor's darkened office. Light glowed from behind the half-closed door. Patel was still working. Ms. Carter slipped in. "I know we're supposed to wait for disclosures," she said, "but I can't keep ignoring this. She's terrified of her father." Patel sighed and gestured toward a chair. "Tell me what you've seen." Ms. Carter listed the details in order: hunger, withdrawal, bruise, phone call, car lot scene. When she finished, the only sound was the hum of the air vent. "You've done everything correctly so far," Patel said, though her brow furrowed. "Still, unless the child verbalizes that she's being hurt, Child Protective Services may not act. You can file an informational report. It creates a record without triggering investigation." "So she stays where she is." "For now." Patel reached across the desk, compassion softening her tone. "I understand how helpless that sounds, but false reports damage trust too. The goal is accuracy." Accuracy didn't comfort her. It felt like bureaucracy wrapped in empathy. By the end of the week, Ms. Carter's growing frustration made the edges of her patience fray. When she met Hank again at dismissal, the man muttered, "That dad was late today. Kid waited 15 minutes in the rain. Poor thing kept asking if she'd get in trouble." The phrase "in trouble" reverberated like a low chord. A crack of distant thunder rolled across the parking lot as the last students boarded buses. From the office doorway, Ms. Carter saw both parents arrive almost simultaneously, an unfortunate coincidence. The mother's small sedan pulled up just before the father's dark car. Emma, already near the curb, froze between them like prey caught in twin headlights. Windows lowered simultaneously. Voices rose, accusations spilling into the damp air. "You were supposed to drop her at my house yesterday," shouted the ISOM man. "I followed the schedule. You changed it last week," the mother shot back. Teachers on duty glanced, then turned away. Custody disputes were familiar storms. Staff protocol was to stay neutral. Emma stood still, eyes wide, backpack clutched so tightly her knuckles blanched. Ms. Carter stepped forward before realizing everyone was watching. The father leaned out of his window. "Emma Carr." Now, the girl hesitated. Ms. Carter caught her eye. Silent reassurance. But Emma obeyed the command. Steps jerky. When the car door slammed, she flinched visibly. The mother called out, "I'll see you Sunday, baby." The words were thin against the closing window. The car sped away, splashing water across the curb. The mother stood in its wake, arms folded tight. Ms. Carter approached carefully. "She's a good kid," she said quietly. The woman smiled faintly, but her eyes were red. "She's trying so hard. He thinks I'm turning her against him. I'm not. You don't have to explain." "I do," the woman whispered, "because if she tells anyone she's scared, he'll say I coached her. Then I lose her. You understand?" Ms. Carter did. Deeply. When she drove home that night, the echo of that parking lot scene filled her car louder than the radio. The system prized neutrality above protection. The counselor's careful language looped in her head: informational report, accuracy, confidentiality, until the words meant nothing. She thought of Emma's cracked umbrella drawing, of the tiny figure drenched in her own storm. At her apartment, she spread papers across the kitchen table: student notes, observation log, contact sheet. Her hands shook slightly as she checked the guidelines again. Nothing forbade her from keeping her own documentation. Nothing said she couldn't seek advice off the record. She scribbled a name on her notepad: Lena Ruiz, an old college friend who had gone into social work. Before calling, she stared at the phone, remembering the child's trembling voice behind those coats. "I don't want to go home." She dialed. The conversation was brief, but grounding. Lena reminded her that moral obligation sometimes outpaces policy. "Write everything down," she advised. "Dates, quotes, actions. If it escalates, you'll need it." After hanging up, Ms. Carter sat listening to the quiet tick of the kitchen clock. She poured herself a cup of tea she didn't drink, then opened a new notebook. At the top of the first page, she wrote carefully, "Emma Dawson, observable indicators." Underneath, She began listing details in tidy print that steadied her shaking hand. She didn't yet know that the next step would push her past the comfort of procedure. For now, she only knew she was already walking into the shadows, one small act of courage at a time. Wednesday afternoon brought the kind of gray stillness that makes clocks sound louder than they are. The final bell had a rung. Hallways stretched vacant, except for the faint scuff of shoes from the after-school program. Miss Carter sat in the staff office, filling in attendance sheets, when the intercom crackled. "Can someone keep an eye on Emma Dawson for a few minutes? Her father's running late again." "I'll take her," Miss Carter replied too quickly. The receptionist hesitated, then thanked her. Emma arrived, clutching her backpack like a second ribcage. "They said Dad called," she murmured, standing in the doorway as though waiting for permission to breathe. "That's fine, sweetheart. You can wait here with me until he gets here," Miss Carter said, sliding a sheet of stickers aside to clear space at the table. "Do you want some water?" Emma shook her head, twisting one sleeve into a rope. The office smelled of coffee grounds and laminate flooring. Outside, the playground stood empty except for the swing chains clicking faintly in the wind. A single desk phone blinked with a new call. The secretary had stepped out to the copier, so Ms. Carter picked it up out of habit. The voice on the other end was sharp and male. "This is Mr. Dawson. Put my daughter on the phone." Taken off guard, she passed the handset across the desk. "Your dad wants to talk." Emma's small fingers trembled around the receiver. "Hi. Yes, I'm here," she whispered. Then she went silent, listening. Ms. Carter turned away to give the illusion of privacy, but couldn't help hearing snatches through the quiet. A man's clipped sentences, indistinct, but tense. Then Emma's voice, barely a thread. "Please don't yell. I didn't mean... I know. I'll be ready." Her face blanched white. "Yes, sir. I promise." The line was still open when an unfamiliar tone sounded, and the office speakerphone engaged automatically. The father's voice filled the room, too loud, metallic at the edges. "Emma, do you hear me? You'll go straight to the car. No delays, no excuses. You've been acting strange, and I'm sick of it." Miss Carter froze. Emma whispered into the phone. "Dad, people can hear." "I said now," the voice barked. "If you keep pulling this with your mother, she'll lose you for good, understand?" A silence, heavy enough to crush air. Then the softest reply. "Yes." Miss Carter moved forward, lowering the speaker volume, heart pounding. "Mr. Dawson," she said evenly. "This is Ms. Carter, Emma's teacher. The line seems to be on speaker by accident." The man's response was quick, defensive. "Then turn it off. My daughter doesn't need school interfering with family business." The call ended with a hard click. The dial tone buzzed against the plastic cradle. Emma stood very still, hands shaking. "He didn't mean he'd hurt anyone," she said quickly, half to herself. "He just gets mad sometimes." Miss Carter crouched to her level. "You're safe. Here right now, okay? You don't have to explain." "But if I make him wait, it's worse," Emma whispered. "He says Mom will lose me forever if I say bad things." The words knifed through the teacher's composure. Training told her avoid promises, reassure safety, gather facts. But instinct, older and stronger, told her to protect. She rose slowly, mind racing through district protocol. Contact counselor, principal, document conversation, no personal transport. Every rule balanced on the edge of compassion and consequence. Principal Gaines stepped into the room just then, rubbing his temples. "Everything all right?" "She got a disturbing call from her father," Miss Carter said carefully. "He sounded angry, threatening even." Gaines sighed, tone weary. "Custody exchanges are volatile. Best let the office handle pickup. We are required to keep neutral unless the child makes a direct disclosure of harm." "She's frightened," Miss Carter insisted. "He told her mother would lose custody if she talks." "That may be manipulation, but without specifics, we document and move on," he said. "You know how messy these cases get. Last thing the district needs is a complaint about staff making assumptions." He meant, "Last thing I need." She heard it in his voice. Protocol advised compliance. Morality whispered rebellion. When Gaines left to field another call, Miss Carter sat beside Emma again. Do you have something you'd like to say before he arrives? The child's eyes darted toward the door. If I talk, they take me away, she murmured, like they did my cousin. You're not in trouble. Emma only shook her head. The sound of tires outside made her flinch. Minutes stretched. At last the door opened. Mr. Dawson stood framed in the threshold, tall, impeccably dressed, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sorry for the delay. Long meeting. He extended a hand toward Emma, who hesitated a fraction before obeying. Thank you for watching her, he told Ms. Carter in a tone that was both polite and warning. We value our privacy. Of course, she said, producing a neutral teacher's smile. She watched him usher Emma down the hall, one hand on the girl's shoulder like a leash disguised as guidance. When the glass doors closed behind them, the office seemed to exhale. Ms. Carter remained still for several minutes. The dial tone from the dropped call hummed faintly, accusingly. Principal Gaines reappeared. All set? She's gone. Good. I'll note the contact and mark it resolved. He gave a perfunctory nod and left. Resolved. The words scraped her nerves raw. She shut off the lights and stepped into the corridor. Hallway clocks gleamed their steady indifference. Outside the staff entrance, the rain had returned, a thin mist under the sodium lamps. She reached her car just in time to see the Dawson vehicle exiting the parking lot, Emma's pale face catching one brief strobe of light before vanishing. The drive home was silent except for windshield wipers. At a red light, she realized her hands were locked so tightly on the steering wheel that her knuckles blanched white. She forced them to loosen. All evening, her apartment felt smaller. Dinner cooled untouched on the stove, while she replayed the fragments of that conversation in her mind. He says Mom will lose me forever if I talk. She opened her laptop again, drafting a summary of events. Time, date, language used, tone of voice. Words lined the screen in calm professional order, even as her stomach twisted with anger. When she printed the page, the ink smear at the bottom looked like a bruise. Ms. Carter paced. Sometimes bureaucracy acted like weather, slow, impersonal, inevitable. But the voice she'd heard through that speaker had heat, intention, edge. Waiting felt like complicity. By 10 p.m., she had packed her messenger bag with documentation, the phone exchange summary, observation notes, copies of attendance. She stood at the window, city lights blurred by drizzle, and tried to breathe evenly. A small part of her still believed the system would do its job if she followed its rules. Another part, larger now, whispered that the system moved too slowly for frightened children. She turned from the glass, flicked off the lamp, and left the papers on the kitchen table where she could see them in the morning. Her final thought before bed was a vow she couldn't frame into policy language. I will not be silent again. Outside, the rain kept falling, quiet and relentless, as if echoing the whisper that had started everything. I don't want to go home. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving thin sunlight stretched across the parking lot. Ms. Carter arrived an hour early, earlier than even the custodian, her bag heavy with paperwork, and her mind heavier still. She placed the organized folder of notes on her desk, like a confession waiting to be heard. All night she'd debated whether documentation alone could protect Emma. Today she planned to test the answer. She began by typing an email titled, Urgent Follow-Up Regarding Student Safety. It was brief, factual, undeniably calm. Observed distress following parental contact, audio evidence of harsh verbal exchange, fear of parental retaliation. Her cursor hovered over the send button for several seconds before she clicked it. The note went straight to the principal, the counselor, and the district liaison. Her pulse thudded in her throat as the message disappeared into the system's polite silence. The day unrolled in fragments. Students worked through reading groups, unaware that their teachers' thoughts were elsewhere. She corrected papers with automatic precision. On the page where Emma had written storm 3 times in one sentence, Ms. Carter had to stop, pen trembling. When recess came, she lingered at her desk and listened to the distant laughter outside, trying to decide whether playing by the rules still meant doing right. At lunch, she found herself outside the counseling office again. Mrs. Patel looked up from her computer, expression weary but kind. "I saw your email," she said. "You did the right thing documenting everything. I've forwarded it to Child Protective Services for review. How long will that take?" "There's a queue. They assign investigators within 72 hours, unless it's emergent." "Threats on speakerphone aren't emergent?" Patel sighed. "Without physical evidence or disclosure, it ranks as concern, not emergency." Ms. Carter stared at the floor tiles. "So, we keep waiting." "I know it's frustrating," Patel said softly. "But if you overstep, the district steps back. We lose access entirely." That afternoon, she received a reply from Principal Gaines. "Thank you for thorough reporting. No further staff action required at this time." The calm, corporate tone felt like a door closing in her face. She read it twice before quietly deleting the message. By the end of the school day, she couldn't sit still. While students filed out, she gathered the folder from her desk and tucked it into her bag again. The custodian called a cheerful goodnight as she left, and she murmured one in return, though her chest felt hollow. She drove downtown to the county office, a low concrete building with flickering fluorescent lights at the entrance. The sign read, "Department of Child and Family Services," but the inside was almost deserted. A security guard sat behind a plexiglass partition watching a small television. "I need to file a report," she said quickly. "I'm an educator. It's about one of my students. I believe she's in danger with a custodial parent." The guard shrugged. "Office hours ended at 4:30. You need to come back tomorrow or submit online." "There must be someone on call. Hotline handles after hours. Phones only." Ms. Carter pressed the folder against her chest. "I've already filed paperwork through the district. I just wanted to be sure someone actually reads it." "They will," the guard said, his eyes never leaving the television. "Eventually." Outside, the wind knifed through her coat. She lingered in the parking lot beneath the streetlight, feeling like she'd walked straight into a wall made of procedure. The folder's weight under her arm was no comfort. It was evidence without a listener. She sat in her car for a long time, engine off, until her fingers grew cold. In the glove compartment lay her old address book, a relic from the years before everything was digital. She flipped through the worn pages until she found a name she hadn't spoken in years. Lena Ruiz, county social worker, college friend, truth teller, relentless in her compassion. Miss Carter dialed the number, her voice small. When it connected. "Lena, it's Claire Carter. I need your advice. Off the record." The conversation stretched across 20 tense minutes. Lena listened first, then spoke in the calm, grounded tone of someone accustomed to crisis. "You've done everything by the book," she said. "But books don't always save kids. You need corroboration, something indisputable. If you can document environmental conditions, that pushes it into an actionable category." "How am I supposed to do that without trespassing?" "Not trespassing," Lena said. "Visiting. Teachers check on families for academic concerns all the time. If his side of custody looks unsafe, a description from a mandated reporter carries weight. Just be careful, Claire. Keep it professional. You'll have to live with whatever lines you cross." When the call ended, Miss Carter remained still, the phone warm against her palm. She stared across the dark lot where moths circled the light pole. It was the same exhaustion she'd felt years ago. Another student, another silent proof she'd failed to act before tragedy struck. She had promised herself never again. She opened her notebook on the steering wheel and began writing. Plan, home visit, academic pretense, observation only. The words steadied her, shaped the chaos into intention. That night at home, she assembled an envelope with copies of every document just in case the originals vanished inside bureaucracy. She labeled it Emma Dawson, records copy, confidential. Then she tucked it behind a stack of lesson plans in her kitchen drawer. Over reheated soup, she rehearsed how tomorrow might go. She would bring Emma's reading assessment papers, mention a need for parental signature on a project rubric. If the father questioned her presence, She would frame it as follow-up, all legal, technically. Her hand still trembled as she scribbled the phrasing onto an index card. I understand you're busy, Mr. Dawson, but supporting Emma's progress takes teamwork. Soon the words blurred together. She pushed the bowl aside and walked to the window. City lights shimmered against the wet pavement below. Somewhere out there, a child was dreading the sound of an engine pulling into a driveway. The thought hardened her resolve. Before bed, she double-checked her phone, scrolling through saved voicemails. One was from the school secretary confirming pickup arrangements, Mr. Dawson's curt voice layered over office sounds. Tell her I'll handle everything at home. She saved the message to her computer, labeling it Audio 01. Tiny evidence, but real. When dawn came, she woke before the alarm, the decision already made. She dressed simply, gray slacks, chambray blouse, the same neutral professionalism she'd worn for decades, but beneath the calm exterior pulsed adrenaline, unmistakable and dangerous. At school that morning, Emma greeted her with a faint smile that slipped quickly. Away. During reading group, Miss Carter said, You're making great progress. I may stop by your dad's after school to have him sign your project sheet. The child's head jerked up, alarm flashing across her face. Do you have to? It's just paperwork, Miss Carter said gently. He doesn't like visitors. Then I'll keep it short. Emma stared at her hands. Please don't stay long. The warning cut deeper than any bruise. Miss Carter nodded slowly, hiding the tremor in her throat. Throughout the day, she replayed what she'd told Lena, how every rule seemed designed for comfort rather than courage. By dismissal time, her nerves were taut strings. She waited until the last bus left before gathering her folder and heading to her car. Outside, clouds pressed low, but the forecast promised clear weather. A rare break. At a red light, she caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror. Drawn face, determined eyes. Professional concern, she murmured, practicing the phrase again. Downtown turned to narrow residential streets, lined with duplexes and faded mailboxes. She parked half a block from the address listed in the file. The neighborhood was quiet except for a barking dog fenced behind one of the yards. Officials might call it transitional housing. Locals just called it the Strip. Paint peeled from unit doors, curtains sagged, but from one window she noticed a child's drawing taped to the glass, a bright sun half torn away. Standing on the cracked walkway, folder clutched to her chest, she felt the absurdity of her plan. A teacher alone, pretending to deliver schoolwork at dusk. Yet, retreat felt worse. She knocked, counting heartbeats between each echo. When the door opened, she saw first the shadowed hallway, then the man filling it. Mr. Dawson's polite smile surfaced like a mask rising from water. Ms. Carter? This is unexpected. I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced, she said evenly. Emma's class project needs a parent acknowledgement form. I was in the area. His gaze flicked over her shoulder to the empty street, assessing. You teachers are sure dedicated. We do our best. He stepped aside just enough to gesture her in. The air inside smelled of stale smoke and cleaning solvent. Somewhere down the hall, a television murmured low. Emma, he called sharply. Your teacher's here. A small figure appeared from a doorway, eyes wide. For a split second, hope flashed there, then confusion. Ms. Carter forced a steady smile. Hi, sweetheart. Just needed a quick signature. The father extended his hand for the papers. His grip brushed hers. Dry, strong, rehearsed. She's fine here, you know. People like to make assumptions because divorces are messy. I only care about her learning, Miss Carter said. The drawings she's been making are powerful. She's very observant. She gets that from me, he replied, tone flattening. In that pause, Emma tugged lightly at her teacher's sleeve, motion almost imperceptible. Her eyes darted toward the living room wall. Ms. Carter followed the glance, and saw it. Frames hanging crooked, one cracked glass corner, beneath which lay sketches scattered across the floor. Without comment, she knelt to gather them. I must have dropped these, she murmured. One was a drawing of a bathroom with a small figure curled beside the tub, labeled safe spot. Another showed empty plates on a table, The words "no dinner days" scribbled overhead. Her throat tightened. She handed the pages back. She's very expressive. I might use these for her portfolio review. Whatever helps her grades, he said, already guiding them toward the door. The polite smile had cooled into command. Outside, dusk settled in lavender bands across the yard. She thanked him again, signed paper now in hand, and retreated down the cracked walkway. Only when she reached her car did the tremor begin, small shakes traveling from her fingertips up her arms. Inside the car, she laid the drawings across the passenger seat, each one a silent testimony. Her sense of danger was electric, but also oddly peaceful. She had crossed the line, yet it felt like stepping into truth. That night, she documented everything: time of visit, environmental conditions, verbal exchanges, artwork descriptions. She uploaded photos she'd discreetly taken of 2 sketches when the father wasn't looking. Then she wrote a final entry in her notebook. Informal home check confirms indicators of neglect and fear. Next step, formal report tomorrow morning before school. She set down her pen and exhaled, a sound half between a sigh and a prayer. Protocol was broken now, but so were all her doubts. Friday afternoon unfurled slow and uneasy, the kind of day when every noise felt amplified. The last of the buses had gone, leaving only the faint shuffle of paperwork and the buzz of fluorescent lights in room 204. Ms. Carter packed her satchel carefully around the folder of notes and the copies of Emma's drawings. The edges of the pages felt almost alive against her fingers. Proof that couldn't be unheard or unseen. She waited until the traffic out front thinned, then drove the familiar route toward the row of duplexes. The spring sky was the color of dishwater, half cloud, half light, and the late sun smeared the buildings in the pale gold. As she approached the address, she moved slower, letting the car's tires hum quietly over asphalt patched with tar. The duplex sat in a line of neglected homes, paint pulled away from siding like old bark. Emma's father's car was there, the dark sedan angled partly onto the curb. She parked one house down, opened her window slightly, and listened. From inside came no music, no television, just the hollow quiet of people measuring every word. She rehearsed her phrase again in her mind. I just need a parent signature for a reading log. It was innocuous, school-safe language, a shield made from paper. She tucked a set of vocabulary worksheets into her folder for camouflage, then stepped out. On the short path leading to the porch, broken toys hid among weeds, a faded jump rope, a cracked plastic truck, and a soccer ball deflated until it looked like a shriveled fruit. She paused, the air heavy with detergent and something burnt, then knocked softly. The sound traveled down a narrow hallway before footsteps answered. Mr. Dawson opened the door, dressed in pressed slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled. His eyes flicked over her shoulder before settling into practiced cordiality. Ms. Carter again. Twice in 1 week. You must really care about your students. It's my job to, she said, keeping her voice steady. I forgot to get your confirmation on some academic forms. This won't take more than a minute. He stepped aside with a gesture that looked gracious but felt rehearsed. Come in, then. The place is a mess. Excuse the boxes. We've been reorganizing. The living room told a different story. Floor scattered with unopened mail, a lamp with its shade tilted sideways, carpet darkened by what looked like spilled juice left to dry. She took one careful step inside, the smell hitting her first. Sour laundry layered with cleaning spray, the combination that speaks of hurried cover-up rather than housekeeping. From a doorway, Emma appeared. Small, barefoot, her hair in a loose braid. The brief flash of hope in her eyes when she recognized her teacher was quickly shuttered behind politeness. Hi, Miss Carter. Hello, Emma. Are you working on your reading project? She will be, the father interjected. Tomorrow's our study day. He pushed a pile of magazines off the couch. Please sit. She perched at the edge of the cushion, scanning the room with teacher eyes disguised as casual observation. Near the window, a thin blanket lay rumpled where it didn't belong, next to an empty cereal bowl and a flashlight. Her stomach tightened. A blanket near a window often meant Sleepless nights, waiting for daylight. I wanted to drop these off, she said, handing the worksheet packet forward. Emma's been making real progress. That's good to hear, he said. Her mother complains I'm too strict, but discipline builds character. Don't you agree? Ms. Carter offered a non-committal smile. Consistency helps children feel safe. He laughed once, short and humorless. Safe. That's her mother's favorite word, as if I'm some kind of threat. The tension in the air sharpened. Behind him, Emma's eyes darted toward the hallway again. She mouthed something too faint to read. Ms. Carter pretended to open her folder and, as she did, let her gaze follow the child's direction. The hallway was dim, the far door slightly ajar. Through that gap, she glimpsed what looked like a folded sleeping bag beside the bathroom tiles, a small toothbrush cup on the floor instead of on a sink. Would you mind if I set this form on a table while you sign? She asked, needing movement to mask the surge of adrenaline. He gestured to the counter. Go ahead. She placed the papers down and noticed, half hidden beneath the telephone, a row of lined notebook pages, children's handwriting pressed hard into paper. The top line read, Rules for Dad's house. Beneath, stay quiet. No closing doors, no calling Mom unless told. A dark smudge ran through the last line, as if erased mid-sentence. Everything all right? He asked, voice sharp now. She turned, forcing a pleasant tone. Yes, thank you. She picked up her folder to hide shaking hands. Do you happen to have a pen? He reached into a drawer and offered one branded with a bank logo. Here you go. While he scribbled his signature, Emma approached quietly and whispered, barely audible, My drawings. Did you bring them? I did, Miss Carter whispered back. The ones from school are safe. You can make more if you like. Emma looked relieved for a heartbeat. Then the father snapped the cap back on the pen, startling her. Finished, he said. Now, if you don't mind, it's about dinner time. We're keeping a schedule. Of course. She accepted the signed paper, thanked him, and turned toward the door. Good luck on your reading, Emma. I'll see you Monday. Bye, the child murmured, voice so small it barely reached her. The moment she stepped outside, cool air hit her face like release. She walked briskly to her car, pulse pounding harder with each step. When she reached the safety of the driver's seat, the urge to cry came fast and fierce, but she forced it down. Instead, she wrote notes across the back of the form in quick, slanted script. Blanket near window. Strong chemical smell. Written rules. Visible fear. She stayed there until her breathing leveled, then pulled out her phone and opened the camera app. In the reflection of her side mirror, she could see the living room window faintly lit. Emma's shadow crossed once, small and fleeting. Ms. Carter lifted the phone, snapped 2 distant photos. Nothing intrusive, just enough to anchor her story in evidence, and lowered it again. She drove a few blocks before parking at a public library lot to gather herself. The neon sign buzzed. The smell of old pages drifted through the entrance fence. With the car light on, she organized everything. Notes, photos, the signed paper, and 2 sketches she had secretly kept from the folder, the ones with the rain in the bathroom. Together, they formed a quiet map of fear. Inside her, 2 voices argued, one saying she had gone far enough, another insisting she hadn't gone nearly far enough. The stronger one prevailed. She breathed in, steady and deliberate, and whispered into the still car, It's evidence now. Real evidence. When she finally arrived home, night had settled deep. She laid the new pages beside her earlier documentation, aligning edges with care. The small pile looked unimpressive, but she knew each line carried the weight of risk. Tomorrow, she would take it back to the county office. She imagined the clerk's neutral expression turning alert, a file opened, an investigator assigned. Before turning out the light, she added one last entry to her notebook. Observed living conditions confirm pattern of emotional neglect and possible physical risk. Immediate report warranted. The pen left a faint groove from pressing too hard. She closed the cover gently, as if sealing a promise. You're not invisible anymore, Emma, she whispered to the empty room. Then she sat still, listening to the city's late hum until her heartbeat matched its rhythm, nervous, steady, and resolved. Sleep didn't come easily. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the cracked picture frame, the rules scrawled in small, frightened letters, the child whose voice had been too quiet for the world to hear. But beneath the sorrow came something steadier than fear, the certainty that stepping into that house had ended her silence forever. When dawn bled thin over the rooftops, Ms. Carter rose, poured coffee into her travel mug, and slipped the growing file into a plain envelope. The label she wrote this time was simple and irrevocable. Formal report. Immediate attention. She set it on the passenger seat beside her as she started the car. No more rehearsed phrases, no more pretending. The road ahead was narrow and uncertain, but it was at least pointed toward truth. The next morning, Ms. Carter walked into the county office just after it opened, folder clutched against her chest like armor. The waiting area smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. A receptionist with a patient expression looked up from her screen. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm a teacher. I need to file a report of possible neglect, maybe abuse." Her voice trembled slightly on the last word, but she kept her gaze steady. "Have you submitted online already?" "Yes, but this has photos and written notes. I want to be sure it's received." The receptionist nodded, taking the envelope and stamping it with a date. The hollow thump of the rubber seal sounded far too casual for something so crucial. "It'll be logged today. An investigator will contact your school if they need clarification." "Will someone see the child soon?" The woman softened. "Cases are prioritized based on immediate risk. The supervising officer will review it." "Immediate risk." Paper language again. Ms. Carter thanked her and stepped outside, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The whole visit had taken less than 10 minutes, but she felt as if she'd aged months in that hallway. Driving back to school, the air inside her car felt too still. Every stoplight dragged. She imagined an invisible queue of folders like hers, each one holding a child's name, each waiting its turn behind some numbered tab. By the time she pulled into the staff lot, first period was starting. She forced herself into routine. Attendance, instructions, spelling review. The class chanted word patterns while her mind drifted between daydream and dread. At 10 a.m., an email arrived from Child and Family Services, auto-confirming receipt. Investigator will be assigned pending availability. She printed it and slipped it into her records file, though the word pending made her throat tighten. During recess duty, she saw Emma sitting alone under the basketball hoop, sketching in the dust with a stick. Ms. Carter wanted to kneel beside her to whisper, "I've told someone, help is coming," but confidentiality sealed her mouth. She simply waved. Emma looked up, returned a tiny, hesitant wave, and went back to drawing. A clumsy heart divided by 2 lines. Back in the staff lounge, gossip hummed around the coffee pot. Mr. Lewis leaned on the counter. "Heard you've been nosing around that custody case," he said, voice half teasing. "Careful. The district hates drama." Ms. Carter poured herself water instead of answering. Another teacher added, "Parents complain fast these days. Even a good heart can look like overstepping." "I didn't do anything wrong," she said quietly. Mr. Lewis shrugged. "Just be ready if admin asks questions." Later, when she passed the principal's office, Gaines motioned her in. "I received an inquiry notice from social services," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Apparently, they opened an initial file based on your report." "Yes, sir." "You realize that puts us under review, right? Every time a report is filed, district compliance audits the site." Her stomach dropped. "I was following mandatory reporter law." "I know," he sighed. "Just next time, loop me before escalating externally. The board gets jumpy about litigation." She wanted to ask how many children the board had actually saved by being jumpy, but bit back the words. Understood. The meeting ended. The reprimand disguised as guidance hung between them like a gray mist. By afternoon dismissal, parents crowded the pickup lane. The familiar black sedan pulled up, shining too clean for the cracked pavement around it. Emma hesitated at the curb. Her mother stood a few cars ahead, waving, but traffic rules prevented any conversation. When Emma climbed into her father's car, Miss Carter caught a fleeting glance, tired acceptance rather than fear, and it twisted something deep in her chest. That evening, a call from Emma's mother came through the school line, transferred to her room after hours. "I heard you filed something," the woman said without greeting. "Did it make things worse?" He told Emma she'd be sorry if teachers started lying. Miss Carter gripped the phone. "He said that?" "He didn't hit her if that's what you're asking, but he scares her, and she's scared to tell anyone. And now he knows people are watching. He'll be careful." "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just keep her safe when she's with you. That's all anyone can do until court." The call ended with static. When Miss Carter hung up, guilt flooded in like cold water. Reporting was supposed to help, but all she'd managed so far was to paint a target on a frightened child. The next day brought silence from the agency. No acknowledgement beyond the automatic email. She tried to focus on work, but every childish laugh sounded like a brittle shell about to crack. That afternoon, she sent another message, following up on case filed yesterday, referencing minor ED, please confirm field contact status. The reply came 6 hours later. Investigator assigned pending scheduling. The same phrasing, repeated like a stamp on a conveyor belt. 3 days passed. Emma arrived each morning thinner around the face, her once careful writing turning uneven. Friday, she came without her lunch. Ms. Carter split her sandwich discreetly, sliding half into a napkin. "You can eat while you finish the worksheet," she said softly. Emma smiled with a ghost of gratitude. "Thank you. Dad forgot groceries again. Does your mom know?" "She tries not to fight anymore." The smallness of that answer nearly undid her. "Try to remember you can always talk to me." The child nodded but kept chewing, eyes down. After school, Ms. Carter watched the sedan pull away yet again. She had imagined that once she told the system would move quickly. Sirens, visits, relief. Instead, there was only the sluggish machinery of paperwork grinding forward at a pace that belonged to no one's urgency. That weekend, she met Lena at a small diner on the edge of town, their first face-to-face in years. Steam rose from chipped mugs of coffee between them. "I did it by the book," Ms. Carter said, voice low. Still nothing. Lena scribbled notes on a napkin. "They're overwhelmed, but your file's strong. When an investigator finally opens it, those drawings will speak volumes." I don't know if Emma has more time to wait. "Then push politely. Call for case status every 48 hours. The record of persistence matters." Ms. Carter nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I can live with being the difficult teacher if it means she's safe." By Sunday night, she'd left 2 voicemails with the assigned investigators department. Monday morning, she called again before first bell and finally reached an assistant. "Case is active," the woman confirmed. "Visit planned within the week." Within the week felt like hope disguised as delay, but it was something. That afternoon, an official sedan appeared in the school parking lot. A woman in a gray blazer introduced herself as Investigator Reed. "I'm here for your statement." She listened carefully as Ms. Carter detailed her observations, occasionally tapping notes on a tablet. When Ms. Carter handed over the folder with photos, the woman's measured professionalism softened. "This documentation is thorough. You probably saved us weeks. Thank you. Will you see her today?" "Yes, and I'll need to speak with both parents before the weekend." Relief hit like vertigo. For the first time in weeks, Ms. Carter exhaled without restraint. By Wednesday, word spread quietly among staff that social services had visited campus. In the lounge, whispers rose. "Did you hear CPS came for that Dawson girl?" Guess Claire wasn't overreacting after all. The murmurs tasted of both admiration and unease. Being right didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking through aftermath. Still, when she saw Emma that afternoon surrounded by 2 calm-voiced officials, the child's shoulders loosened a little. Emma met her eyes, only briefly, and mouthed, "Thank you." That night, Ms. Carter sat at her kitchen table again, surrounded by papers, and realized her fight had tilted something larger than a single case. She'd glimpsed the inside of a maze built to protect reputation more than children, yet one voice, documented, persistent, inconvenient, had forced a hinge to turn. She opened her notebook and wrote, neat and small, system finally moving. Next, court. Continue steady. Courage multiplies when it's witnessed. Rain began tapping against the window once more, not fierce this time, but rhythmic. An ordinary cadence of life continuing. Somewhere nearby, a girl was being tucked in without fear for the first time in months. For Ms. Carter, that was enough reason to keep showing up, to keep breaking silences that others preferred to maintain. And when she turned off the lamp, her heart finally rested somewhere close to peace, never complete, but enough to face tomorrow. Monday crept in beneath thunderclouds, the air heavy with static. By noon, rain lashed the windows of room 204 like loose gravel. During silent reading, Miss Carter noticed Emma's empty chair. The substitute attendance sheet confirmed what the front office hadn't yet noted. Absent. No call. Her stomach knotted. The girl hadn't missed a day since custody week rotation began. She walked briskly down the hall to the office. The secretary looked up, startled by her urgency. Has anyone heard from Emma Dawson's family? Not yet. Probably weather delay, the woman said, dialing numbers. Both phones rang unanswered. Ms. Carter stood listening until the sound stopped. If she doesn't arrive by second period, someone should check. Protocol says we wait until noon before welfare calls, the secretary interrupted gently, as if soothing an overactive conscience. Noon felt like hours away. Back in her classroom, she stared at the rain streaking the glass, each ripple a pulse of dread. When a sheet of lightning flashed outside, she caught her reflection, a face drawn tight, jaw set. She checked the clock again, 10:30. She'd promised herself she would follow procedure, but procedures were written for fair weather, not for instincts that refused to quiet. At 10:45, she picked up her phone and dialed the father's number listed on the contact sheet. Rings fell into an echoing void before a clipped voicemail answered. Next, she tried the mother. No response there either. Only a faint recording saying the line was temporarily out of service. The weight in her chest grew unbearable. She turned toward the doorway as thunder shook the floor. Mrs. Patel? The counselor appeared, coat half on. Are you all right? Emma's gone today. No call. No answer. Something's wrong. Patel frowned. Weather delays happen. Bus reroutes. I've been teaching 20 years. I know when something's different. The counselor studied her, then sighed. I can call the district liaison, but we can't send anyone ourselves. It has to go through proper channels. Channels take days, Miss Carter whispered. She doesn't have days. When Patel left to make her call, Miss Carter opened the window an inch to breathe. Cold rain slid across the sill, dampening the papers on her desk. She wiped them absently, reading Emma's last spelling test, words like storm, shelter, and listen. Each now felt prophetic. By 11, she'd made her decision. She scribbled a note, urgent personal matter, back soon, and left it on the attendant's clipboard. She stepped into the hall, heart hammering, and strode toward the parking lot. Outside, the world blurred to gray. Rain hammered her windshield as she drove the familiar route toward the duplex. Wipers beat frantic time. She rehearsed what she'd say if anyone stopped her. Child welfare check. Educational concern. Halfway there, the storm thickened, darkening traffic lights to pale ghosts. When she turned onto Maple Street, she knew something was wrong even before she saw the house. The sedan that usually sat straight in the drive was half crooked, door slightly ajar. One curtain flapped from an open window. Her breath caught. She parked, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles hurt. There were no neighbors outside, just the hiss of rain and faint rumble of distant thunder. She stepped out, shoes sinking into muddy puddles, and moved toward the door. Emma? She called softly. No reply, only the clatter of wind knocking something loose inside. She knocked once, then again, harder. Mr. Dawson? It's Miss Carter. Still nothing. She tried the handle. It yielded without resistance. The door creaked inward. revealing a lightless living room heavy with tension, stale air mixed with the metallic scent of overturned cleaner. "Hello?" she whispered, crossing the threshold. The quiet felt bruised, as if a fight had exhaled and left traces behind. A chair lay on its side. A photo frame face down showed a family portrait with the glass spider cracked through the middle. She followed the faint sound of dripping toward the hallway. "Emma, it's me, Ms. Carter." Every syllable was a prayer. From behind the bathroom door came a small gasp. The voice that followed was thready, hoarse. "Please don't tell him." Her pulse stuttered. "Emma, open the door, sweetheart. It's safe now." Keys rattled somewhere outside. A drawer slammed. Panic jolted her forward. She knelt, pushing gently on the door until it creaked open. Emma crouched by the tub, clutching a stuffed rabbit damp from the floor. Her hair clung to her cheeks, eyes swollen from crying. "He got mad," she whispered. "He said Mom made lies and now she's going to lose me." Miss Carter lowered herself to the tile, speaking softly, evenly. "You're safe with me. We'll call someone to help. He said if anyone comes, he'll take me somewhere they can't find." Emma sobbed, shaking. "Not tonight," Miss Carter said firmly. "Tonight, we stay together." She reached out, palms up, keeping her voice low and steady despite her racing heart. "Can I help you stand?" Emma hesitated, then crawled forward, small fingers wrapping around hers. The simple contact broke something open in both of them. A sudden noise from the living room, a door slamming against the wall, made them both startle. Ms. Carter rose fast, guiding the girl behind her. But instead of footsteps, another sound came. Car tires, spinning violently on wet pavement, fading into the distance. She waited, breath held, until silence thickened again. Whoever had slammed the door was gone. She turned back to Emma. "We have to leave now, sweetheart. Can you walk?" The girl nodded, trembling. Miss Carter guided her down the hallway, past the overturned chair and shattered picture frame. Outside, rain needled their faces. She hurried Emma into her car, wrapped her spare cardigan around her, and locked the doors. For a moment they sat listening to the storm. Thunder rolled, closer this time. Ms. Carter grabbed her phone, hands slick with rain, and punched in 911, her voice steadied by force. "This is Claire Carter. I'm at 182 Maple Street with a minor. Possible domestic disturbance. Child at risk. The residence appears unsafe. We need officers immediately." The dispatcher's calm tone steadied her further. "Units are on the way. Stay in your vehicle if possible." She hung up and turned to Emma. "Help's coming. You did nothing wrong." Emma's eyes filled again. "Are you in trouble now?" "Maybe," Miss Carter said. "But that's okay." They waited. Sirens began, as a faint echo growing louder until blue lights flashed across the rain-streaked windshield. Relief and fear collided inside her chest as 2 patrol cars pulled up. An officer approached cautiously, raincoat glistening. Ms. Carter opened her window an inch. "Teacher," she explained quickly. "Found child alone. Signs of distress inside. Possible altercation earlier." The officer nodded, his partner moving to secure the house. "You did right calling it in, ma'am." When they opened the car door, Emma shrank back instinctively. "It's okay," Ms. Carter whispered. "They're here to help." The smaller of the 2 officers crouched down to Emma's level, speaking gently. "Hey there. We're going to keep you safe, all right?" He offered a blanket from his cruiser. Emma looked to Miss Carter for permission before taking it. Minutes blurred into coordinated motion, questions to dispatch, photographs, routine words like preliminary, statement, welfare check. Miss Carter answered mechanically, describing the scene as clearly as she could. Rain soaked through her jacket, chilling her skin, but she barely felt it. Finally, the officer said, "Child Protective Services has been notified. They'll arrange temporary placement tonight. She can't stay here." Ms. Carter nodded, though the reality hit like a blow. "Can I go with her until they arrive?" He hesitated. "You're not family." "I'm her teacher," she said, voice breaking despite effort. "She's scared. Please." After a brief pause, he relented. "Stay with her at the station. Paperwork first, then we'll see." They drove behind the patrol car toward downtown, Sirens now silent, but lights still pulsing against the wet road. Emma leaned against her, exhaustion overtaking fear. Every mile felt both relief and dread wound together. Inside the fluorescent calm of the precinct waiting area, officers processed reports while a social worker arrived, a young woman with eyes too tired for her age. She crouched beside Emma. "Hi, sweetie. I'm here to make sure you're safe. We'll take you somewhere warm tonight, okay?" Emma's small nod was enough. The woman turned to Ms. Carter. "You can give your statement now. We'll contact the mother once we confirm custody." As Ms. Carter signed each form, the pen shook slightly. The social worker touched her arm. Not many teachers would have done this. "I waited too long," she murmured. The woman's voice softened. "You didn't. You acted when it mattered." When procedures finally slowed and Emma was bundled into a county car, Ms. Carter knelt to hug her. "You'll see your mom soon," she promised. Emma whispered, "You came." Her throat closed. Always. The car pulled away into flickering streetlight. For a long moment, Miss Carter stood under the station awning, watching rain ease into drizzle. Then she walked to her own car, the smell of wet asphalt rising like memory. She sat there until dawn's first pale hint crept along the horizon, realizing she had crossed every line and somehow ended up exactly where she needed to be. When her phone buzzed, she saw a text from Mrs. Patel. "Police contacted me. Are you okay?" She typed back with trembling fingers. "She's safe. That's what matters." Outside, the sirens had faded, but an echo of them stayed in her chest, steady, certain, alive. Every beat said the same thing. She hadn't been too late. And for the first time in months, she let herself cry without restraint, tears mixing with the rain until they were indistinguishable. One teacher's small storm breaking at last. Morning broke in soft gold, the rain finally gone. The news spread through Maplewood before first bell, an overnight welfare response. A teacher, a child, removed from unsafe conditions. By the time Ms. Carter stepped into the building, whispered versions trailed her like an unseen breeze. Some expressions held gratitude, others caution. She nodded to each politely, knees trembling under the weight of what she'd done. In the principal's office, reports from police and social services already sat stacked on his desk. Principal Gaines looked up as she entered. "They said you were involved last night," he began, voice calm but tight. "Everything under control now?" "She's safe." Miss Carter's throat ached from lack of sleep. "That's all I know." He folded his hands. "I won't pretend I'm not concerned about the procedures you bypassed. You left campus without authorization and engaged directly with a family under investigation." His tone softened. "But I also can't ignore that your intervention corroborated serious neglect. The system's reviewing your status temporarily, standard practice after an incident. Temporary leave." The words landed like gravel against glass. "How long?" "Until the district completes their safety review. With pay," he added quickly. "This isn't punishment, just due diligence." She nodded, though a hollow opened inside her chest. "Tell the students I'll be back soon." Leaving the office, she crossed paths with Mrs. Patel. The counselor's eyes filled with both apology and pride. "You did what many of us think about doing, and never dare," she said softly. "The investigators confirmed your documentation was the turning point." "That doesn't make it easier." "No," Patel agreed, "but it makes it right." In the pale light of room 204, desks waited in perfect rows. She moved slowly among them, collecting stray pencils, smoothing worksheets, letting the quiet fill her. Emma's seat stood empty except for the hand-drawn name tag curling at the corners. On impulse, Ms. Carter straightened it. The faint scent of chalk and crayons felt unchanged, yet everything inside her had shifted. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. An unfamiliar voice introduced itself as Aisha Reed, the social service investigator. "I wanted you to know the child's with her mother for now," Reed said. "Pending court decisions, placement looks stable. Your file was invaluable. Photos, timestamps, direct quotes, all of it. Without those, we might have missed clear evidence of coercion. Ms. Carter exhaled slowly. Thank you for telling me. One more thing, Reed continued. The department recorded your call as a critical intervention. That's rare. You probably saved her months of harm. After the line disconnected, Ms. Carter sat wordless at her desk. Relief came not as triumph, but as quiet exhaustion, like air finally let out of a long-held breath. 2 days later, she received formal notice of administrative leave. It sounded neutral on paper. In practice, it meant space to absorb the aftermath. Parents whispered in pickup lines, some offering hugs, some avoiding her altogether. Once a colleague murmured, "Brave move, Claire. Just hope it doesn't cost you your license." She smiled faintly. Then it will have been worth the price. Evenings felt different now. No stacks of spelling tests. No constant second-guessing. She spent those first nights sitting near her apartment window, watching headlights drift below, wondering if Emma slept easier, if she'd eaten a warm meal, if she and her mother could finally breathe without measuring words. On Friday, the phone rang again. This time, a small voice filled the line. "Ms. Carter?" Her heart stirred. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Emma. Mom said I could call. That makes me glad." Silence hummed for a beat. Then, "I'm okay. The house smells different. She lets me draw before bed." "I bet your drawings are beautiful," Ms. Carter said, smiling through sudden tears. "They asked about you in the hearing next week. The lady said you have to talk in court so the judge knows the truth." "I'll be there," she promised. "Okay." A pause. "Thank you for coming that night." Her voice barely held steady. "You never have to thank me for doing the right thing." After the call, Ms. Carter pressed a hand to her chest. Gratitude hurt sometimes. It left nowhere for the ache to hide. That weekend, news of the case appeared in brief lines of local print. Teachers' vigilance aids in child's rescue. The article quoted no names, but coworkers left folded copies on her porch. When Monday came and she wasn't in the classroom, students asked the substitute when Ms. Carter would return. "Soon," the woman told them. "She's helping fix something important." The comments spread through 5th grade, turning into playground whispers. By week's end, children were writing thank you notes in block letters. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for being brave." Mrs. Patel delivered the small bundle to her apartment. Ms. Carter read each one slowly, tears tracking down the sides of her face. By the following Monday, sunlight once again filtered through room 204, glinting off laminated word walls. The district had not yet lifted her leave, but she came in quietly to collect a few items. On Emma's desk lay a folded paper, slipped there who knows when. Inside was a simple crayon drawing, 2 houses joined by a rainbow. Below it, 3 words written carefully. "We are okay." Ms. Carter traced the curve of the rainbow with her thumb. The world hadn't changed overnight, but this small proof of healing was enough. Some ripples began as whispers, others as a teacher refusing silence. She placed the note in her bag and stepped into the hall, where laughter floated from another classroom, steady and alive. For the first time in weeks, she let herself smile, knowing that courage, once spoken aloud, never fully fades. It travels quietly from one person to the next, the way morning light finally finds its way through rain-streaked glass. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, that mixture of nerves and routine found anywhere justice is expected to operate. Miss Carter sat on a hard wooden bench outside courtroom 3B, the folder of her notes balanced on her knees. She had dressed in quiet colors, charcoal skirt, pale blouse, clothing meant to blend, not distract. Still, her heart knocked against her ribs with every creak of the hallway door. Aisha Reed found her there. "Thank you for coming," the investigator said, settling beside her. "Your statement will follow the mother's. Stay factual. That's enough." "I've written it out," Miss Carter replied. "No embellishments." Reed nodded. "Good. The evidence is clear. He contested the neglect finding, but the photos and your documentation tie together. It may still get emotional." The courtroom door opened. A clerk called their names. Inside, the air was cooler. fluorescent lights washing everything pale. On one side sat Emma's mother, hands folded tight, face drawn but steady. Across the aisle, Mr. Dawson, immaculately dressed, his lawyer whispering close. He didn't look toward Miss Carter, though she felt the weight of his contained resentment like static in the room. The judge, an older woman with silver-streaked hair, adjusted her glasses. We're here to determine placement and custody of minor ED. We'll begin with statements of care. Emma's mother rose first. Her voice trembled at the edges but held firm through its truth. She spoke of nights spent waiting by the phone, of a daughter forced to choose allegiance instead of safety. As she described the morning Emma had finally returned to her arms, even the stenographer paused mid-keystroke. Then it was Miss Carter's turn. She carried the folder to the stand, fingers damp against the plastic cover. The oath felt heavy in her mouth. Do you swear to tell the truth? As if all her months of worry condensed into that single vow. She began, slowly, explaining the first afternoon she'd overheard Emma's call. How the voice behind the coats had sounded too small for a casual complaint. How drawings, bruises, and fear had built a pattern that couldn't be ignored. She described the visit to the house, careful with tone, avoiding judgment even as emotions threatened to break her composure. He was cordial, she said of the father, but controlling. The environment appeared unstable, discipline, structured around fear instead of safety. The child indicated she seldom ate dinner on certain nights. I believed in good faith that she was at immediate risk. The judge studied her. Why did you personally intervene after filing official reports? Because the response was delayed, Miss Carter answered. Because experience taught me that waiting sometimes costs more than overstepping. My duty as an educator is to the welfare of the child first. The words came steady now, the clarity of conviction replacing fear. The father's attorney pounced. Miss Carter, isn't it true that you entered private property without consent? I knocked and Mr. Dawson allowed me inside. Under false pretenses. Academic paperwork, correct? She met his gaze. Under the pretense of concern, sir, which was genuine. The judge raised a hand, signaling enough. The court has reviewed photographs corroborating the witness's account. Proceed carefully, counselor. The lawyer subsided, glancing at his client, whose jaw clenched visibly. Reed's testimony followed, confirming that the teacher's evidence matched subsequent investigation. Malnutrition indicators, excessive discipline methods, the set of written household rules discovered during inspection. Each detail stacked like bricks, forming the outline of truth. When all statements concluded, the judge requested a short recess. In the hallway, Ms. Carter leaned against the wall, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. Emma's mother approached quietly. She keeps asking if you'll be there when they decide, the woman said. I'll stay, Ms. Carter promised. Tell her I'm still her teacher, no matter what happens. The bailiff reopened the doors. Everyone filed back in, subdued. The judge read from the bench, voice measured, but not unkind. Evidence demonstrates a consistent pattern of emotional harm within the father's residence. The child exhibits improved stability under maternal care. Custody, therefore, is granted to the mother. Visitation with the father will remain supervised pending review after 6 months. Silence hung, heavy and reverent, before the single sound of air leaving the mother's chest. Relief as faint as prayer. The judge added, "The court commends school personnel whose attentiveness ensured the child's protection. Ms. Carter, though your actions extended beyond standard protocol, they exemplify moral responsibility. Let this serve as both recognition and reminder that courage within systems saves lives." Applause wasn't permissible, yet a rustle of movement passed through the room, shoulders lifting, breaths released. Afterward, near the courthouse steps, Emma ran across the wet pavement toward her. The child's hair gleamed in the noon light, loose now, her eyes clear. She carried a stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. "Ms. Carter," she called, breathless. The teacher bent to meet her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma embraced her with sudden strength. "The judge said I can live with Mom. I told them you helped me draw the truth." Miss Carter hugged her back, holding carefully, afraid to let the moment fracture. "You did the brave part," she said. Emma shook her head. "I just drew. You listened." Behind them, reporters began snapping distant photos, not of faces, but of the symbolic reunion. Miss Carter waved them away gently, guiding Emma back toward her mother. The woman mouthed, "Thank you," through tears. Later that afternoon, a letter from the district awaited her at home. It was formal, yet human. While your decision to intervene bypassed administrative procedure, the board concludes that your judgment protected a student from imminent harm. You are hereby reinstated, effective immediately. Continued employment contingent upon adherence to future protocol. She laughed softly at that last line, a sound halfway between amusement and disbelief. Adherence to future protocol, as if courage could be scheduled. When she returned to room 204 weeks later, sunlight poured through the windows, washing the chalkboard in gold. The students greeted her with cheers that tangled into laughter. On Emma's desk lay a small envelope. Inside was a handmade card drawn in bright crayon, a teacher and a child standing beneath one umbrella large enough for two. At the bottom, in careful printing, "Thank you for hearing me." Ms. Carter placed it on the shelf beside the attendance bell, where she could see it each morning. That evening, as she locked the classroom and walked down the quiet hall, her reflection moved alongside her, tired, older, but steadier. In the window's faint reflection, she could almost hear Emma's old words turned inside out. Not, "I hate them," or "I don't want to go home," but a new phrase carried on the silence. "I'm finally home." And for the first time since that afternoon behind the coats, Miss Carter believed that listening could change the shape of a life. The classroom smelled of sharpened pencils and early spring, that clean expectancy of new things beginning. Afternoon sunlight slanted through tall windows, touching each row of desks. Ms. Carter stood at the doorway watching her students pack up, chattering about weekend plans, pencils rolling, chairs screeching. The noise no longer felt overwhelming. It sounded alive. When the last child waved goodbye, silence returned, soft and ordinary. She crossed the room slowly, straightening books, brushing chalk dust from her hands. At Emma's desk, she paused. The crayon drawing of two houses, joined by a rainbow, was still pinned beneath clear tape. She didn't move it. Some reminders deserve permanence. The hallway clock ticked steady as she gathered her bag. Her reflection in the window looked older, perhaps, but clearer around the eyes, the steady sort of clarity that follows doing something irrevocable and right. Outside, parents laughed near cars, voices loud with relief that the week was done. Once their brightness would have sounded distant to her. Now it felt like proof that the world, despite everything, could mend itself a little at a time. Days had lengthened back into routine. Emma lived permanently with her mother now, attending a different school across town where sunlight filled the art room at every hour. They exchanged letters sometimes, short notes, a few drawings, an occasional update about a new puppy or favorite book. Each message ended the same way. "I like home now." Mrs. Carter kept them in a folder labeled simply Hope. In faculty meetings, policy talk still circled around liability and documentation. She listened without argument, noting how fear of mistakes shaped so many decisions. She had once shared that fear. It had protected her until it nearly cost a child her safety. Now she understood that rules mattered most when they protected the voiceless, not the comfortable. After dismissal one Friday, a new girl lingered near the back table, waiting while her classmates raced to buses. She hesitated before speaking. "Can I stay here a little longer, Miss Carter? Just till Grandma comes?" "Of course," the teacher said, kneeling to straighten the girl's backpack strap. The child smiled, shy but steady, and settled into a seat by the window. Outside, the late light painted the hallway gold. For a moment, time folded back to the echo of another voice behind the coat rack, a whisper that had begun everything. She felt the old ache rise, gentle now, transformed from panic into reminder. Not every story would demand the same kind of courage, she knew. Some would require patience, others, fierce intervention. But she would never again dismiss a small voice as ordinary worry. Listening had become her quiet promise to every child who walked through her door. Before locking up, she glanced once more at the rainbow drawing. The colors had faded slightly, but the bridge between the two houses remained bold. She smiled. "You can rest easy now," she whispered. To Emma, to herself, to anyone who might still be waiting to be believed. "You're finally home." If this story touched you, share your thoughts below so others know they're not alone. And if you want more stories about everyday courage, the kind that changes lives one small act at a time, subscribe and stay with us for the next one.